Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lunch Break Science. I'm Ariel Johnson from the Leakey Foundation, a nonprofit that supports human evolution research and shares discoveries. I am delighted that we are back. Today, we have an exclusive Chimp Empire updates, quizzes, prizes, and more. And I'm also very excited to share some exciting upcoming episodes with you as well. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Let's welcome today's guest, Leakey Foundation grantee, Isabel Clark. Izzy, thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, Ariel. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, Izzy is joining us today from Kibale National Park in Uganda, where she is currently in the field as a field researcher at the Ngogo Chimpanzee Project. Izzy is also a student at the University of Texas, Austin. And we zoomed into Ngogo there. Before we dig deeper, though, thank you to the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation, Camilla and George Smith, and the Joan and Arnold Travis Education Fund, as well as viewers like you for making today's episode possible. You can show your support of Lunch Break Science by subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, sharing, and donating. So, Izzy, as I mentioned, you are joining us from the field in Kibale National Park in Uganda. And it has been very rare that we have had someone actively in the field. So, what is a recent field highlight?
Yeah, so there's been a Makuso fig tree, which is one of the chimp's favorite foods, fruiting really close to camp. So yesterday, I only had to walk about 10 minutes to get to a good group of chimpanzees. There's a lot of feeding, but also grooming and playing. And so one of the most fun things I saw yesterday was adult male Miles, one of the stars of Chimp Empire, playing with a juvenile Kano. And we don't get to see males playing with little kids every day, so that was very fun.
Well, and you mentioned Chimp Empire. Many of our viewers may be familiar with the Ngogo community of chimpanzees from the recent Netflix docuseries Chimp Empire. What makes the Ngogo chimpanzees such a unique community to study?
Yeah, so the Ngogo chimps have been studied since 1995, and they were the largest group ever studied with around 200 individuals. So, I mean, in this photo, ton of chimps, but this is just a fraction of them. Yeah, it's a big group. They live in the middle of Kibale National Park in western Uganda in a really abundant patch of forest surrounded on all sides by more forest and other chimp groups or communities, as we call them. So it's these ideal conditions that have probably allowed for the group to be so big. But in 2015, the Ngogo chimps began to split into two smaller groups with distinct but overlapping territories, as you can see in this map of their tracks. And this kind of split is really rare in chimpanzees. So chimps are territorial and hostile to their neighbors, as we'll get into more later. So we're witnessing an unusual period of aggressive, sometimes lethal conflict between former friends and even relatives. So we saw the first case of lethal aggression in 2018, and there have been several killings since, all by the smaller and more cohesive Western community against the larger group they splintered from, which I'll refer to as the Central Easterners or just Centralers. So a lot of this drama was captured by the amazing crew behind Chimp Empire on Netflix, which again, if you haven't seen, I highly recommend watching. Hopefully I don't give away too many spoilers today.
Well, our viewers will all have a chance to ask questions about the Ngogo chimpanzees and Chimp Empire later in the episode, but I have to know because I have been worried. How is Gus doing?
Yeah, Gus is doing great. So for those of you who don't know, Gus is one of the breakout stars of Chimp Empire. He's a somewhat awkward adolescent male, as most adolescent males, both chimp and human are. And the series follows him as he tries to integrate himself into the adult social world. He's definitely still working on that and has not yet earned the respect of the alpha, Abrams, or other high-ranking males, but he recently hit a milestone with DJ. So DJ is not super high-ranking, but he's the little brother of former alpha Bartok. So he does what he wants and really is not good at grooming others back. But I caught him grooming Gus back the other day, and they were both really excited about it. You can see that they're panting, which doesn't happen for your sort of normal everyday grooming session. So it's clear that they were both excited about this this grooming exchange. So yeah, no need to worry about Gus. There's definitely still hope for him.
Great. I like cannot wait to hear more about the chimpanzees and your work. But first, I would love to know how you became interested in studying science and what was your trajectory from that initial inspiration to where you are now.
Yeah. So I grew up in New York City, which is the complete opposite of here. But I think growing up in the city actually made me appreciate wildlife even more. And I always loved going to the Museum of Natural History and the Bronx Zoo. Here I am as a little paleontologist. Um, and my first wild primate encounter was in Japan, where my mom is from. I was 8 or 9. We were hiking in the Kamikochi Mountains when we ran into this big troop of wild macaques. And that really left a big impression on me. So in high school, I was really interested in biology and specifically ecology and evolution, that side of things. So I went to Duke University for college in large part because of the Duke Lemur Center, which has the biggest population of lemurs outside of Madagascar. And I helped out in the fossil division there throughout my 4 years. So yeah, young paleontologist Izzy would have been very excited about this. And then I got to study abroad in Madagascar, and that's where I got hooked on field work. Overcame my bug phobia that I had grown up with in the city, and I did my senior thesis on lemur intestinal parasites, and enjoyed looking at lemur poo, which is what I was holding in that photo, under the microscope and extracting DNA from it. But after getting to dabble around in a lot of cool projects, I found that what I really loved was being out in the field observing animals. So after I graduated, I had an opportunity to work as a research assistant for the Ngogo Chimp Project with Erin Sandell, who's now my PhD advisor. And I spent half a year here and just really fell in love with the chimps and all of their drama, especially in the early aftermath of the split. And here I am 5 years later doing the old PhD.
Well, we are now going to turn the virtual floor over to you and hear more about your research. So for everyone watching, be sure to stay tuned for the Chimp Identification Challenge to win a chance to win prizes and to ask your questions to Izzy. So now let's turn the virtual floor over to you, Izzy, and hear more about the Ngogo chimps.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a bit about my PhD project, which I'm still very much in the middle of collecting data for. So I've been here about 4 months so far this time, and I'll be here for a year total studying how territorial behavior develops in young chimpanzees at Ngogo. So many social group living mammals, from humans to meerkats, are territorial, and they compete with neighboring groups over resources. This competition is often indirect through behaviors like scent marking and vocal exchanges, but in some species, encounters between groups can include physical aggression, which may lead to injury or even death. So chimpanzees, of course, are one of these species. And chimp groups or communities, again, can be really large, but they exhibit fission-fusion dynamics, which means they form temporary subgroups or parties that are constantly changing in size and composition. So the whole group is rarely, if ever, all together. And parties that consist mostly of adult males go on these silent single file patrols deep into neighboring territory. They actually kind of resemble human patrols. So the military acronym SLLS stands for Stop, Look, Listen, and Smell, which is exactly what chimps do. They pause every so often to scan and listen for neighbors. They sniff the ground or vegetation for any signs that neighbors have been in the area. And there's also a lot of reassuring touch. So this is really a collective cooperative behavior. Oops. Sorry. So when chimps run into neighbors, this is called an intergroup encounter. If patrolling chimpanzees encounter a party of neighbors that outnumbers them, they may just silently retreat or vocalize from a distance. In this case, there was a large party of neighbors a few hundred meters away on the other side of the valley. They listened for a few minutes, then retreated, but you'll notice that they're vigilant bipedal, so standing on two legs, and this adolescent male in the back fear grimaces and seeks contact from an adult male for reassurance. Meanwhile, the Alethea, the infant in the front, was just staring at me. So if rival parties are pretty equally matched, they may approach each other and engage in charging displays back and forth, maybe with some contact aggression. So just a warning, this is going to be a little bit loud. So yeah, for the most part, they are just having these big screaming battles with a little bit of physical contact. But if when a patrol encounters a small group of neighbors or a lone male, they're more likely to collectively attack by mobbing, beating, and biting the male. So here, Cannonball is an adolescent male of the Ngogo Central group, and the Westerners snuck up on the small party he was in. So while the others ran away, they managed to surround Cannonball, who's being shielded by his mother and adolescent sister. And again, this is going to be loud. So hopefully you could see the three chimps in the middle there who were being attacked. But probably because Cannonball's mother and sister were there, he was actually able to get away and recover from his wounds. So Cannonball is fine. He was just around today. So when successful, lethal aggression has been shown to lead to territorial expansion. So here's a map of the Ngogo chimp territory. And the lines represent the tracks of patrols that were observed between 1999 and 2008. And frequent patrols on the northeastern border led to lethal attacks on neighbors represented by these dots. And this reduced the neighboring group's coalitionary strength, which then led to a roughly 20% increase in the Ngogo territory size by 2009. An increased territory size has been linked to increased food availability, larger foraging parties, more mating opportunities, and higher female reproductive rates. So patrolling and lethal intergroup aggression seem to have adaptive benefits, at least for the winners. So while we have an idea of the function of intergroup conflict in chimpanzees, we know less about its underlying mechanisms. What we do know is that hormones play a role in the territorial behavior of adult chimpanzees. So cortisol, which is released as part of the stress response, may increase in anticipation of a stressful event, even in the absence of the stressor itself. So adult chimpanzees seem to anticipate territorial activity as they show spikes in urinary cortisol both before and after patrolling, as well as when they're in close proximity to the territory border. And testosterone has also been linked to intergroup conflict, primarily for its role in aggression and reproductive competition. So in species where group territory size is linked to reproduction, reproductive competition can occur both between and not just within groups. So in humans, testosterone spikes are thought to promote aggression against outgroups and cooperation between group members. And in chimps, testosterone increases prior to and after territorial patrols, similar to cortisol. But the hormonal changes prior to patrols and encounters raise the question of how chimps anticipate collective territorial activity. And if they're using subtle behavioral cues of other group members, these need to be recognized and perhaps learned. So we'll come back to that. But in addition to hormones, certain key individuals seem to catalyze intergroup conflict. For the Gombe chimpanzees in Tanzania, the presence of 3 impact patroller males, shown in dark gray here, made it more likely for parties to patrol than when these males were absent, which is shown in light gray. At Ngogo, adult males vary widely in their patrolling tendencies, participating in anywhere from 2% to 74% of patrols. What factors explain this variation? One, males with higher rank and reproductive success participated more at Ngogo, which makes sense if they benefit more from defending the territory than low-ranking males who have no offspring or fewer offspring in the group. Males also participated more at times, and this is over a, I believe, 10-year period, when the group had fewer total males and the cost of not contributing to party size in the face of intergroup competition was probably higher. But some frequent participators or impact patrollers seem to be inherently more motivated, regardless of rank or reproductive success. So if you've seen Chimp Empire, you're probably thinking of Westerner Rollins, the patrol leader, and his younger brother, Damien. So when territoriality develops is key for understanding its mechanisms, and developmental factors might help explain some of the variation we see in adulthood. In lions, for example, individual tendencies for leading and lagging during intergroup conflict emerge during juvenility and seem to persist into adulthood. But in chimpanzees, territorial defense is considered a predominantly adult male activity. And past studies on patrol participation in Eastern chimpanzees only considered mid-adolescent to adult males and have not included females or males younger than 12 or 13 years. But preliminary data from Ngogo show that immature individuals do go on patrols. So this is just a sliver of data I collected in 2019, during which the Central Eastern group went on 10 and the Western group went on 19 patrols. So the x-axis represents all individuals, represents the ages of all individuals, and the y-axis is the proportion of individuals patrols that these groups patrols that these individuals went on. And the Western community is represented by circles, the Central by triangles, males are blue, females are orange. So you can see that from a young age, individuals vary widely in their patrol attendance. And for males, participation does generally increase with age. But if we zoom in to these same data, but just juveniles and adolescents, so aged 5 to 15 years, participation rates increased as we might expect, mostly in males, but we have these 8-year-olds, so late juveniles, going on a good portion of the patrols. And we can see that males patrolled more than females, but that some females also participated pretty frequently. And since females are the ones who disperse, whereas males stay in their natal groups, for adolescent females, patrols and encounters might actually be a good opportunity to scope out neighboring groups and their territories as they decide where to disperse to. If you recall the video I showed earlier of Westerners attacking Centraler Cannonball while his mother Sigourney and sister Fricka defended him, Fricka actually dispersed and joined the Westerners permanently just a couple of months after that happened. So the ultimate betrayal. And even her mother, Sigourney, has been seen voluntarily hanging out with both Central Easterners, where she's from, and with Westerners. And she and Fricka were both with the Westerners just today, actually. So it seems like females in general, and a few Ngogo females in particular, have more fluid group membership, and their motivation for patrolling might be different from that of males. But the strongest predictor of participation between age, sex, and community, so West versus Central East, when I ran a generalized linear mixed model on these numbers, was actually community. So Western juveniles and adolescents, especially males, so the solid green line here, participated in a greater proportion of patrols than their Central Eastern counterparts. So all of this shows that joining patrols is about more than just age and sex. So far we've just looked at patrol attendance, or whether or not individuals were present, but the extent to which young chimps are aware of outgroup risk and actively participate in territorial activity is not known. So juveniles may eat and even play while adults are quiet and vigilant on patrol, and here's an example of that. So this is Rollins at the front, the famous patroller, and some of the other Western males behind him, just listening for neighbors. But if you look at the back, at that log, you will see in just a moment, 2 juveniles just running after each other, playing. So they're clearly not too concerned, while the others are now bipedal. They've heard neighbors. they're clearly really on edge. And here's some of that reassuring touch I was talking about. So learning who group members are and what constitutes their territory may be a complex and gradual process for young chimps. They have prolonged developmental periods, and they stick with their mothers even after weaning. While males tend to range the full extent of the territory, females spend more time within these preferred core areas. So females who range near borders might be at higher risk of encountering outsiders. Females also vary in how much they and their offspring socialize with other group members. So some juveniles may have special relationships with certain adults, maybe due to bonds these adults share with their mothers, whereas other adults may essentially be strangers. So even reunions between group members who haven't hung out in a long time can be tense and aggressive. So can young chimps even distinguish within group reunions and between group encounters? So some of the questions I'm trying to answer with the research I'm doing now are, when do young chimps begin to not only tag along on patrols, but to actively participate? And when do they begin to exhibit these characteristic spikes in cortisol and testosterone in anticipation of territorial activity, as I mentioned earlier? Second, what are the sources of variation we see between individuals besides age and sex? Why do some participate more than others? So for that, I'll consider things like past experience with intergroup conflict and exposure to territory borders, for which I'll look at where individuals tend to range. And the idea is that their heightened awareness of neighboring groups may increase their motivation to participate in territorial activity. I'll also consider their social relationships. So we know that adult chimps are more likely to participate in intergroup conflict if their maternal relatives or bond partners are present. Social bonds may facilitate collective territorial behavior because bonded chimps trust each other more and to not flake out in the face of neighbors. And for example, young chimps with older brothers may be more likely to participate, like Damien with Rollins. And young chimps that are just more socially integrated with adult males may be more likely to join. Finally, I'll consider individual differences in personality and underlying hormonal correlates. So are certain juveniles and adolescents just bolder and more risk-seeking than others? And are they more likely to then patrol and actively participate? So what does a day of collecting data to answer these questions actually look like? We wake up in the dark, which might be my least favorite part of fieldwork. And then we go out looking for chimps based on where we left them the day before, what trees are fruiting. Hopefully we hear their morning calls, but we also look for fresh poo and knuckle prints, which is the photo on the right. And once we find some chimps, I'll stick with one of my 60 juvenile and adolescent subjects for around 3 hours and jump from subject to subject until we head back to camp in time for sunset and dinner at 7:30 on the dot. I record their behaviors continuously on my phone using an app called HandyBase. I also record all occurrences of any key social behaviors I see, like grooming and aggression. And I'll analyze these data to quantify the social relationships and personality traits. And then during patrols and intergroup encounters, we just record as much as we can. So filming is really important so that we can look back later and try to quantify behaviors like vigilance, fear grimaces, vocalizations, reassuring touch, charging displays, and contact aggression. And then we also collect urine samples, either by pipetting it off of leaves or ideally catching it with a pee stick. So that's what I have in the photo on the right here. And these will be assayed for cortisol and testosterone back in the primate ethology and endocrinology lab, the P lab at UT Austin. Collecting all these data requires a lot of time, especially since chimps are fission fusion and we don't see everyone every day. So that's why I'm here for a year. And I also have the help of my amazing research assistant, Astanju Blessing, in the middle here in this photo, and the Ngogo Chimpanzee Project staff, and just a few of them are in this photo as well. So with that, thanks for listening, and stay tuned for what will hopefully be some interesting findings on the development of cooperation and conflict in one of our closest relatives.
I am so excited by that talk. I wish I get that these talks are short, but I sometimes wish I could hear more. Anyway,
the extended version.
I know, right? Well, thank you again, and now we are going to have that that fun activity that I mentioned earlier. So we're going to have a chimpanzee identification quiz. So Izzy and her colleagues get to work with these amazing chimpanzees over long periods of time and watch them grow up. And now we will have you all try your hand at chimp identification. So the way it will work is Izzy will share a photo of a chimpanzee featured in Chimp Empire. You all carefully observe the characteristics of the chimpanzee because you will then need to identify which of the 3 chimpanzee photos we'll share is the younger version of the first chimp you'll see. So once the 3 photos of the chimpanzees are up on the screen, you will have only 30 seconds to select your answer. Because we have a special prize, so we needed to make it a little harder. So Izzy's colleague, Dr. John Mutani, has upped the stakes of this challenge by sponsoring 3 prize t-shirts. So if you win, you will get to select your color of t-shirt. You will win if you are the first person watching live on YouTube or Facebook to answer correctly. And you will obviously win that Ngogo t-shirt. We will have 3 rounds and we will be giving 1 prize for each round, and you're only eligible to win once. So before we get started, Izzy, are there any particular traits that you look for to help identify chimps and would be helpful to our viewers to
Yeah, for me, I look at sort of the overall kind of structure of the face. So the brow ridge can be really helpful. Of course, that does change with age a little bit. And then I think noses can be really helpful too. And I would say just, yeah, don't focus too much on their coloration because that changes a lot with age.
Okay. So I guess let us look at our first round of identification. Again, you'll be observing this chimp, which was a recent photo. And in just a moment, the younger photos will come up on the right here. You're identifying which one of these younger chimps is the same chimpanzee as the chimp on the left. As you see, there's a little countdown on the bottom there. So please get those answers in. We have a couple of answers already. We are almost out of time. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so we have had several answers come in. So let's see what we've got here. Let's take a look at all the answers we've got so far. We have some 2, 1, 1. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. Okay, so let us look at what the correct answer is.
Number 3. I had a feeling a lot of people would guess number 1. I chose it for that reason.
You know,
First
it's
one
like
actually DJ, but he looks a lot like Pork Pie.
I feel like when you first see them, you're like, oh, it's this one. And then you look at all of them and you're like, no, wait a minute. I'm not quite sure. So who is our winner for round 1? Let's see. Bas, congratulations. We will be reaching out to you to get your address to send your shirt and select size and color and whatnot. Okay, so now that we know how it goes, let us go on to round 2. Again, as you see, time is of the essence when answering. Okay, so let's go on to round 2. Here we have Abrams, who you just saw this morning. Actually,
yes.
just a few hours ago.
Yeah, he actually, so I'm in quarantine camp now where the internet's better. And he blocked the road because he came to camp. So I almost did not make it up here.
Okay. Now we're almost running out of time, so get in those answers. This is really fun. So yeah, so we have quite a few answers that have come in. Let's take a look at some of them. Got 4, 6, 5. Yeah, I mean it's hard. It's a hard one. They're all hard. You definitely stumped us. Okay, so let's look. What is the correct answer? Which one is the younger Abrams?
I feel like we need a drum roll. Number 6.
I know, right? We do.
It's
Well,
once you know, it's like, okay, that's obvious, but I think it's hard. That one was hard for me too, even.
well, congratulations, Brent. We will again be reaching out to you to get your information and send you your prize. Okay, so now let us go to the final round.
Who will it be?
Ooh.
Joya, one of my all-time favorite chimps.
Okay. Remember, speed is of the essence here. This one is tricky too.
Yeah, the little ones are the hardest.
They're all so cute too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cuteness is a distraction.
It is very distracting. Okay, we've gotten quite a few. Okay. So let's see what the answer is. Which one is it?
It is
The
number
eyes.
7.
The eyes are, they're just like you can definitely see. It's in.
And Joya's got really distinct nostrils, I think.
Oh yeah, and like there's that little spot on the head. Yeah. Okay, so who is our winner? Kendra, congratulations. So again,
a lot of people got that one right, actually.
Yeah, I thought that one was actually the hardest. I definitely when you sent them to me, I totally got that one wrong.
Yeah, I mean, people have such different kind of things they focus on. I think for some people, certain chimps are easier to identify than others, and it's definitely not universal.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, thank you all for participating in the challenge. Congratulations to our winners. A special thank you to Dr. John Mitani and the Ngogo Chimpanzee Project. If you would like to get your very own Ngogo t-shirt, we have shared a link in the chat so you can do so. I know I'm definitely getting one myself because I couldn't participate. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting one. Okay, so back to questions. Observing the chimpanzees, there are just so many parallels between their behavior and ours. How do you keep from personifying the chimpanzees?
Yeah, it's really hard not to anthropomorphize them because so much of how they behave is familiar and relatable to us. And I'm kind of in the camp of thinking it's okay to very cautiously give in a little bit to our natural tendency to anthropomorphize or personify. I think it helps to see the animals as individuals. And chimps are one of our closest living relatives, so a lot of our shared behaviors probably do share origins and some underlying mechanisms. So here's just a recent example of me in the act of anthropomorphizing. So Cedar here in the front is an orphan who has sort of been adopted by Mulligan, the adult male on the right. But here Mulligan is grooming Cedar's peer, Rodriguez. So Cedar sat a few feet away from them, just watching for a while. And then eventually he went over and presented to Mulligan for grooming, but was of course ignored. So I even said while I was filming this, like, I think Cedar's jealous. But of course I was anthropomorphizing. And I shared what happened with other researchers around the dinner table that night and asked if they thought Cedar was jealous. And it turned into this really interesting conversation about how we even define jealousy for humans, the difference between jealousy and envy, and how these emotions might translate or not to a chimp context. So I think it's okay to start with an anthropomorphic thought as long as you're very critical of it. And I think the curiosity that comes from that can be really generative.
I think those conversations that you probably have around the campfire are just amazing. I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, I should just record them.
I know, right? That would make a great series in and of itself.
Yeah.
So as we saw in the videos earlier, you're working really closely with the chimpanzees. what is it like to be in the forest when they are exhibiting aggressive behavior?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll share just a video from this was my first or second week at Ngogo ever, and this was one of the first like really exciting, slightly scary things I saw. But it was the chimps were hunting a red duiker, and so when they hunt monkeys in the trees, that's sort of you just want to make sure you're not under them. But when they're hunting a red duiker, which is a small forest antelope, it's easy to feel like you're going to get run over or something as they're running around. So here's the video. Again, it'll be really loud. So yeah, my heart rate definitely goes up when chimps are displaying nearby. It's really loud when they're screaming. And then intergroup encounters are, so I showed some videos of that earlier, are especially intense because you're trying to document as much of the chaos as possible. But there's also the fear of a chimp getting injured or killed. But in terms of personal safety, I think the best thing to do is keep calm and still, and then move out of the center of things when you can. And so in that video, you can see we're a safe distance from all the action that's going on. And people find this hard to believe, but especially when they're absorbed in their own drama, they really don't see us, and they also manage to avoid us. And so here is a photo of sort of a normal chimp situation. They're just sitting on the ground, grooming, resting. But we always maintain a distance of 7 meters from the chimps and wear masks. And that really helps with preventing them from getting over habituated. So it's, chimps that are kind of have too much contact with humans can be really dangerous, honestly, because they know that they're stronger than us and can take advantage of that. But having this sort of invisible barrier with the chimps, which we've had since this long-term study of them started in the 90s, has really helped with preventing them from getting over-habituated.
Well, I know we have a lot of questions from our viewers, so let's start in on them. If you are watching and have not submitted your question, be sure to get it in now because we have a lot of questions and we may not get to them all. So our first question comes from Pete. Hey, Pete. Okay. Pete is very interested in primate comprehension of time. Do you think that chimps know what fruit ripens when, or are they just finding it randomly by looking or smelling it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I wonder about this a lot too. So yeah, I mean, they definitely have a mental map of the forest. And whether it's similar to a human one, I think it's harder to say, but yeah, and then their conception of time, I think they do, they do check on, sometimes you can tell that they're checking on trees. They'll look up and not go in to the tree and just pass it, and they're probably checking it out to see if it's ripe yet. But there have been times where it really does seem like they know in advance that they make a beeline for this tree. They know suddenly that it's ripe. So yeah, I think it's a question worth pursuing more. I think chimps do have some ability to plan ahead, and there's some cool research showing that. But yeah, definitely an open, interesting question.
Yeah, very. It's like I definitely like a good grant proposal or future episode.
Yeah.
That'd be really neat. Great question. So our next question comes from, actually, we have 2 questions from Jim. Okay. Anticipatory stress response, same as humans.
I think you cut out there for a second, but I assume you just read the question.
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah, so yes, anticipatory stress response, same as humans. I think it's comparable to humans. I mean, the stress response is the cortisol release of the stress response, that's like a really deeply rooted, across animals. It's the same hormones are involved in the stress response. So hopefully that answers your question.
And then
Of course,
we
it's
have
harder. It's hard to study it in wild chimps because we can't be doing controlled experiments. So a lot of it is kind of more correlative data.
and
And
Jim said,
then
yeah, does reconciliation reduce stress?
yes, yeah. So grooming seems to reduce stress, especially with close spawn partners, and reconciliation. So for anyone who doesn't know, after conflicts, and this is not just in chimps, but other primates do this too. After conflicts, chimps will sometimes, a few minutes later, a few hours later, come back together and groom each other. Maybe show some submissive signals. So in chimps, that would be like the pant grunt. And yeah, I think that that does. It's the function of this behavior is to sort of reconcile the conflict and mend whatever hard feelings were produced by the conflict.
I love that we can hear like the sounds of the forest in your background,
Yeah,
which
really good.
actually makes me think of a question that I have, which is when I was watching Chimp Empire, there were just like a phenomenal amount of butterflies. Are there really is it really a butterfly paradise?
Yeah, it's not all the time, but we do seem to have these. There are certain areas where they congregate, especially in swamps, and then certain times of year too. There's just these big outcrops of butterflies. So here's a swamp. This is an elephant footprint full of water with butterflies. Yeah, and actually right now we have what I've been calling an enchanted caterpillar forest. And there are these, it's just, there must have been a hatching recently, but in different parts of the forest, they're just like for a whole acre or so, just all these caterpillars descending from the trees on these little threads. It's a little bit enchanted, but it's honestly kind of like Stranger Things, where it's just like you're trying to like swim through these not quite spider webs, and you're just covered in these tiny little black caterpillars. That I guess
So
eventually
cool.
will turn into beautiful butterflies.
Yeah. Okay. Our next question is from Brent. Okay, Chimp Empire was amazing. It's surprising to me that the chimps seem so completely ignore humans and their video gear. How have they learned to ignore a large chimp-like animal that could be a habitat food competition?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not eating their food. So at least that component, I think they're not worried about us eating their food, just because we never do it. But of course, they still are wary of new things, and large things too. And so, a person is one thing, but a person with like a big camera and some of the equipment they carry around really does take up a lot of space and makes people, the cameramen, look larger. And so there is kind of there has been this extra habituation time required to get them used to that. I think some of the chimps just never did really. So there's a lot of variation in how easily habituated chimps are to new things. Usually like high-ranking males are more okay with it, but definitely not all the time. Like Richmond and Hutcherson, they're high-ranking males, but they've always been a little bit less okay with novelty and just don't like to be followed as much. And even so recently, another camera crew came here and they were actually finding that the chimps had sort of regressed. So they needed to be re-habituated a bit to the equipment after not having been exposed to these big cameras for a year and a half.
Really interesting. Oh
Yeah.
wow. I would never have thought, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. We have lots of questions, so I don't want our next question comes from Beth. With the difference between communities, could patrolling behavior also have a cultural element?
Yeah, it's definitely something I think about a lot. I think it's hard. We have to be careful with that, even though I think in my heart I believe that yes, there could be a cultural element to it. It's definitely something we need to, you know, test every other possibility before we draw that conclusion. And so I think some of the other things to consider are just, you know, the like demography. So how you know, every group has a different size and different composition, and that's true for the two Ngogo groups. And then also, you know, are like they're just the ecology of the habitat in each of the groups could be different. So yeah, there's a lot to consider there. I definitely think it's a really interesting question and something that I'm hoping to get at a little bit with my dissertation.
Well, I look forward to that. I will have to share as you have more publications and continue your research. Like, definitely keep us posted because this was really fascinating. But we do have more questions. So our next one comes from our website, from Sylvan. Um, when the chimp patrol, are there ever interactions with predators? Do you know how much of the patrol behavior is only about the chimp groups, or does it also serve to let other species know this is chimp territory?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So here in Kibale National Park, the chimps don't really have predators. We don't have leopards here. I think a lion was seen here once many years ago that came over from Queen Elizabeth National Park. So yeah, the chimps are really more for, I mean, their predators are other chimps, really. Um, but that being said, this kind of relates to um, not predators, but another reason that they patrol or go on excursions that look a lot like territorial patrols is to hunt monkeys. And so, especially at Ngogo, where they've hunted a lot of they've hunted one of the monkey species they eat here, their favorite one, the red colobus, nearly to extinction locally in there within the Ngogo territory. Um, and so when they do want to go on red colobus hunts, they actually travel to the border of their community to look for these monkey groups. And so sometimes it is hard to tell what the intention is on like what looks like patrol. So single file, like a lot of males, you know, kind of marching quietly to the edges of their territory and it looks like maybe they're looking for neighbors, but sometimes they're just looking for food and especially looking for monkeys.
So, in addition to your research, you also have a blog, which I really, really enjoy reading. Could you tell us a little bit about your blog?
Yeah, so I started that when I first came here back in 2018, and I thought at the time that this was like my once in a lifetime chance to report on my doings at Ngogo, and then of course I ended up coming back, and so I admittedly have been slacking on the blog a bit. I haven't posted in a couple years, but it is something I really want to get back to, and I told myself I was going to do that during my dissertation year. So I appreciate the nudge that I'm getting from you, Ariel, to go ahead and do that because it is. I had fun writing it as well.
Oh, well, I had fun reading it, so definitely please write more and share them with us so we can share them with our viewers and our
Yeah, I
audience.
will.
So definitely, keep us posted on what you're doing. We have another question from Pete. Do the chimpanzees have the same problem recognizing humans? Oh, this is a very interesting question.
Yeah. I think so. Okay. Do chimps, I guess, yeah, I'll rephrase it as do chimps recognize individual humans? I think they definitely do, or they definitely are capable of doing so. Obviously, yeah, chimps in captivity have preferences for certain people or caretakers and things like that. Here, it's less clear because we really don't engage with them. We don't interact with them at all, and so for the most part, we're really ignored. Um, by them, but I have noticed like you know, when a new person comes in that this kind of relates to the earlier question, but a new person will come in and some of the chimps are sensitive to that. They're like, who is this new person? So clearly they can distinguish between a researcher who's been here for a while and someone new. And I don't know if it's more based on clothing or what exactly they're looking for.
So we've run out of time for questions today, but I have one last question for you, and that is, do you have any advice for those interested in pursuing a career in science?
Yeah, definitely. I would say dabble early and often in whatever piques your interest. I definitely did that. And don't be afraid to reach out to people for opportunities to get involved. So if you're still in middle school or high school or even college, no one expects you to be qualified or to know everything. And your enthusiasm is your greatest strength. So just don't be afraid to show it.
Oh, that is great advice. Again, Izzy, just thank you so much. This was an amazing episode, and I just really appreciate, especially like you're in the middle of the rainforest. Like, so exciting.
I'm glad the internet didn't cut out.
I know, right? Great luck.
Yeah.
Or I guess trust in technology. So next time on Lunch Break Science, we meet Leakey Foundation grantee Fernando Villanea and learn about Neanderthal and Denisovan ancestry in American populations. It's going to be a wonderful episode, so be sure to like, subscribe, and set notifications so you will be sure not to miss it. So thank you all for taking a break from your day and feeding your brain with the Leakey Foundation. Until next time, stay hungry for knowledge. Lunch Break Science is brought to you by the Leakey Foundation and made possible by the generous support of the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation, Camilla and George Smith, and the Joan and Arnold Travis Education Fund, as well as viewers like you. Show your support of Lunch Break Science by subscribing to our channel, clicking on notifications, and giving us a thumbs up, or making a donation to help us create new content. Still craving science and can't wait for the next episode? You can feast on the Leakey Foundation's content library with past episodes, lectures, our podcast origin stories, and more. Thank you all for tuning in, and see you next time.